Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Council on the situation in Sudan. During my last briefing in June, I warned once again about the catastrophic consequences of this conflict for the people of Sudan. Since then, the conflict has continued to escalate. The suffering has increased. As we meet today, fighting is raging across multiple fronts in the country. The consequences of this conflict will be long-lasting and should shock us all. 13 million people have fled their homes, including around 8.7 million who are displaced internally across all 18 states. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has documented around 1,400 civilian deaths from January to June this year, including 1,100 people killed by drone strikes. The true death toll since the beginning of the conflict remains uncertain, as conflict and access challenges have made it impossible to obtain figures, but it is likely to be in the hundreds of thousands. Brutal mass killings and atrocities, abductions of women and girls, and mass rapes are recurring patterns. Since the start of the conflict, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has been able to document 838 victims of sexual violence, almost all women and girls, but these figures may only be the tip of the iceberg. Drones launched by both sides have repeatedly struck markets, schools, fuel stations, and water infrastructure. Civilians face the unrelenting consequences of one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. My colleague Tom Fletcher, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, will brief you in detail about the unbearable suffering the men, women, and children of Sudan endure. Mr. President, in recent weeks, fighting in Sudan has been characterized by the heavy use of drones and localized ground combat in areas less affected by rainy season conditions. Hostilities have concentrated in North Kordofan, West Darfur, North Darfur, and Blue Nile states. In North Kordofan, drone attacks continue in the city of El Obeid and its surrounding areas, as both parties compete for control of strategically important territory. In late July, Sudanese armed forces advanced along the northern axis of El Obeid, retaking strategic towns, including Bara Sayala and Jabrat el-Sheikh, following 2 days of fierce fighting. In this regard, we take note of the Human Rights Council resolution adopted on 6 July, expressing deep concern at the imminent risk of large-scale atrocities by the Rapid Support Forces in and around El Obeid, and requesting the fact-finding mission to conduct an urgent inquiry into violations and human rights abuses. Active hostilities have also reignited near Sudan's borders, increasing the risk of a broader regional spillover. Drone strikes near the strategic town of Tina, on the border between Sudan and Chad, have impacted civilians fleeing the conflict, as well as Chadian communities, where the refugee influx is intensifying pressure on already scarce land, water and basic services, deepening vulnerabilities and fueling intercommunal tensions, leading to violent disputes over natural resources. In this regard, in Blue Nile State, fighting close to the border between Sudan and Ethiopia is also a serious cause for concern. The increasing cross-border insecurity risks further straining relations between neighboring states in the region and may lead to additional displacement and refugee flows. Mr. President, another worrying aspect of the conflict in Sudan is its increasing complexity. The sophisticated weaponry used continues to point to ongoing external support to both parties. And while external actors sustain the conflict, the proliferation of armed actors within Sudan is contributing to its fragmentation. Beyond the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces, numerous armed movements and local militias are pursuing their own territorial, political, and security interests. This fragmentation complicates prospects for a cessation of hostilities, undermines the path toward a political settlement and increases risk for civilians. Mr. President, the United Nations continues to support the efforts of the Quad, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates toward a humanitarian truce. We are also working with our Quintet partners, the African Union, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the League of Arab States, and the European Union to help advance a viable political path. In my previous briefing, I updated the Council on the consultations convened by the Quintet in early June. Since then, the Quintet has engaged with a broader range of political and civilian stakeholders. Our goal is to build confidence in a political path and pave the way for an inclusive, Sudanese-led dialogue toward a shared vision for the country's future. Inclusivity is key for a credible process. The Quintet is soliciting views of Sudanese political parties and blocs, civil society, representatives of Sudan's different regions, and other civilian and political actors involved in efforts to end the war, to ensure that a full spectrum of perspectives is heard. At every stage, the Quintet is committed to the full and meaningful participation of women and youth in dialogue and decision-making, recognizing their leadership and perspectives as essential to lasting peace and security. The next round of in-person talks is scheduled to take place in Addis Ababa in September. Mr. President, Sudanese authorities have also stepped up their own efforts to support civilian dialogue, and we welcome all efforts to foster meaningful political discussions regarding Sudan's future. However, in a context where political polarization and territorial fragmentation persist, many Sudanese stakeholders seek an internationally supported framework to strive for a common political vision. Youth, women, displaced communities, professional groups, business associations, and local leaders, among others, want to be involved in a meaningful manner at every stage to advance peace. Their desire for an inclusive and durable peace is clear. The Quintet principals will travel to Sudan in the coming weeks to ensure synergies between domestic and international efforts. Mr. President, the Personal Envoy's good offices are advancing amidst a notably challenging context. In recent weeks, Personal Envoy Havisto has redoubled his engagement with the conflict parties on the urgent need to cease hostilities, as well as on measures that could help build trust between them and de-escalate the conflict. Earlier in August, he engaged with Sudan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Salim Ahmed Ibrahim, and General Hemedti, the leader of the Rapid Support Forces. In his engagements, the Personal Envoy has encouraged unilateral releases alongside negotiated exchanges of prisoners with particular consideration for vulnerable groups such as women and children. Both parties must now make concrete commitments, and the Personal Envoy will travel to Sudan shortly to further advance these conversations. In parallel to these efforts, the Personal Envoy has also continued his consultations with international actors in the region and further afield, including through recent visits to Kenya, Chad, Uganda, and Turkey. They stress the need for all stakeholders and member states with influence on the parties to redouble efforts to incentivize the parties to make a positive contribution to peace. Mr. President, despite sustained efforts to advance peace in Sudan, the parties remain locked in a zero-sum military logic. Greater international attention and action are urgently needed for them to change that calculus. This includes strong and unified messages from this Council to encourage the parties to return to meaningful negotiations without further delay. And we call on the Council to use all the tools at its disposal to advance this objective. We will continue to work with you, other key partners, including the Quad and within the Quintet, to bring this conflict to an end. The Sudanese people cannot wait any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Undersecretary General the